December 7th, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii turned into hell on earth. Without warning, hundreds of Japanese aircraft appeared over Pearl Harbor, unleashing destruction unlike anything the United States had ever seen. Within minutes, battleships were burning, sailors were drowning, and the Pacific Fleet, the pride of America, was crippled. For Japan, it seemed like a perfect victory. But behind the celebration, one man wasn't smiling. Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of the attack, knew something his country didn't. He feared they had just made the greatest mistake in Japanese history. He said quietly, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. To understand why, we need to go back. Japan in the 1930s was rising fast, militarily powerful, but economically trapped. Its empire stretched across Asia, but the U.S. had placed sanctions, cutting off vital oil and steel. The Japanese military saw only one path forward: destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet, seize resources in Southeast Asia, and force America to negotiate. Yamamoto, however, knew the American mind. He had studied at Harvard, lived in Washington, and understood the scale of American industry. He warned the Japanese government, "You can fight for 6 months, maybe a year. After that, I can guarantee nothing." But his warnings were ignored. The war faction in Tokyo demanded action, and Yamamoto, loyal to his emperor, obeyed. The plan he designed was bold, almost suicidal. 6 aircraft carriers would secretly sail across the Pacific and strike Pearl Harbor by surprise. It would be the largest naval air operation in history. No one in the world had ever attempted something like it before. In the early hours before dawn, the Japanese fleet moved in silence. Pilots sat in their cockpits, reading letters from home, whispering prayers. At exactly 7:48 a.m., the first wave appeared over Oahu. "Tora, Tora, Tora," came the radio signal. It meant complete surprise. Bombs rained down on Battleship Row. The USS Arizona exploded, killing over 1,000 men instantly. The sky turned black with smoke and fire. In just 2 hours, more than 2,400 Americans were dead. 18 ships destroyed, hundreds of planes ruined. Japan had achieved everything it hoped for, but not everything went according to plan. The American aircraft carriers, Enterprise, Lexington and Saratoga, were not in port. They had escaped the attack entirely. Yamamoto knew it immediately. The victory was incomplete. In Tokyo, the people cheered. The emperor's advisors spoke of a new empire in the Pacific. But Yamamoto sat in silence, his face dark. He knew America. He knew that once the U.S. entered the war, Japan's fate was sealed. President Roosevelt's speech echoed across every radio in America. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. And from that moment, the full weight of American industry turned toward war. Within months, the U.S. was producing thousands of planes, tanks, and ships faster than Japan could ever dream of. Yamamoto's prediction was coming true. For 6 months, Japan ran wild. They captured Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, each victory celebrated as proof of their superiority. But America was learning, adapting, and building. By June 1942, just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan reached its peak. Its navy was powerful, its pilots elite, its empire vast. Then came the turning point, the Battle of Midway. Japan planned to lure the remaining U.S. carriers into a trap. But American codebreakers had cracked Japan's communication system. They knew where and when the attack would come. At Midway, the hunters became the hunted. On June 4th, 1942, waves of American dive bombers appeared over the Japanese fleet. In less than 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were turned into floating infernos. A 4th, Hiryu, followed hours later. Japan lost over 3,000 men and the core of its naval power. It was a disaster from which they would never recover. From that moment, Japan was on the defensive. Their empire began to crumble piece by piece, island by island. And Yamamoto knew Pearl Harbor had doomed them all. In April 1943, while inspecting troops in the Solomon Islands, Yamamoto's plane was intercepted by American fighters. They had intercepted his travel plans, Operation Vengeance. His aircraft was shot down over the jungle. When soldiers found his body, he was still sitting upright, his hand on his sword. The man who had once been Japan's greatest naval genius was now gone. But his prophecy lived on. By 1945, Japan was in ruins. Cities burned under American firebombs. The Navy was gone. The atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the emperor finally surrendered. The war that had begun with pride and ambition ended in ashes and regret, and history looked back on that fateful morning at Pearl Harbor, not as Japan's greatest triumph, but as its greatest mistake. Because in war, every victory has a cost. And some victories cost everything,